And Winton deeded the property to Kootenai County for educational or hospital purposes. And it kind of sat there. Kootenai County, I think, thought that was very nice, but didn't know exactly what to do with it. And in a town that had a population of 8,000, why there wasn't much of a demand for anything. There was plenty of beach everywhere and so forth. When this brouhaha occurred in 1972 with the proposed development, we contacted Winton. And I have a letter right here from David Winton addressed to Barry Schuler, president of the college, saying, we're totally opposed to that. And what happened was that Winton gave the property to the college, but it reserved the property between the dike and the river because it was storing logs out there. So it reserved that property for its own particular use. And the log storage was out there, and Winton didn't store logs, but they still had the property out there. Well, when all this came up, why they said, we never intended that property ever to be college. Well, more than they were talking about the beach, but more than that, the land itself, when it was deeded to the county, was deeded with a right of reverter, and said, in the event that this property is not used for the public purpose intended, we get it back. And that's still there, and that's still in place. And so what would happen now is if any effort were made to transfer the college property itself into some private ownership, I'm sure there'd be some Winton that would suddenly appear and say, it's all mine and I get it back again. So it's a permanent. That was the first. So the college itself, most of it is on solid grounds. When the federal government came in with the grant, they made particular specifications, which is Land and Water Conservation Fund, that says this land cannot be taken out of where it is unless you get something comparable. You went through this sort of thing when you had the tennis courts out here. You had to find something comparable. You had to produce something comparable, and it has to be approved by the state authority somewhere down there away from Coeur d'Alene that says that's all right. And you've got to reimburse, and you've got to do a lot of other sort of things. The net effect is that once the Land and Water Conservation Fund comes in with federal money, it stays there. Tubbs Hill's the same way. It's not going to go anywhere.
Excellent. Also, in relation to the beach that given to the county, what the college said, and then the county gave it to the college under that agreement they could. The beach they had not, and it's my understanding that Winton Lumber Company sold the beach to Peck River Lumber Company out of Sandpoint, Idaho, and then with these federal grants and the recreation money, it was bought from Peck River.
Correct.
But still, it's in that control that you're indicating. And so both for the college, most of where all the college sits and the beach is preserved permanently for two purposes. One, the college educational process, and two, the beach for public use and enjoyment. We just have about 2 minutes left, Scott, and I want to have you maybe use that time to say to viewers in other places that when this kind of conflict arises, and is it going to be private property and developed, or is it going to be public access, what advice do you have to citizens who support public access? What can they do? And we'll get more into this next week, too, on the case of this particular case study, but what advice do you have to the public?
Well, first of all, they should contact Tony Stewart and get 3,000 signatures. But we have a far greater awareness now of where our rights are and what the public rights are and so forth. And so any effort to transfer any of that property anywhere would create an enormous uproar and couldn't be done. It's always nice to know that the law is on your side. We live in a somewhat nebulous area in terms of law, but that is one thing you can say for absolute sure. There is a steel wall around all of this in which nothing can be moved and nothing can be changed, and the title cannot be altered. And all they have to do is blow the bugle and sound the troops to come out, and that'll be the end of the discussion.
And not only here in North Idaho, but I think around many places in the United States that when those areas have been used as public and it's threatened, people tend to rally against that, and that's political influence that they use.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
They get the attention of the decision makers that may have to deal with it. Right. One other footnote, it was true in our campaign in 1972 that it was a coalition of college students and senior citizens, and there's not any more effective groups because you really can't pressure either one. the college students have minimum wage jobs and senior citizens have retired. And so I thought that was a really effective way to go about it. There's no way of putting pressure on them, but they actually did in 2 weeks gather 3,505 signatures, but who's counting the number, you know? That's how many it turned out to be in 2 weeks. And it's in the middle of the winter, too, in the snow. It was an amazing story. But, Scott, thank you for being with us today. It's been most informative, and as Janelle Burke said, you truly are a really champion of the public's access to property. You've been very successful, and you've used your legal great mind to be involved in a lot of these cases, because a lot of it has been legal questions, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us again next week, and we'll continue this conversation with Scott Reed about public lands and public access. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station. Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
Today we're bringing you part 2 of a 2-week series on a very important topic that many of you will be very interested in, that has to do with public lands, public access to beaches and to national parks and state parks. And a lot of people have been really great heroes in helping set aside these, and a number of people have donated and contributed in many ways. And our guest is a real expert in this field. We welcome back to the program Scott Reed, who's an attorney in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and he has a baccalaureate degree from Princeton University, and his law degree is from Stanford University. And last week we were talking a lot about a lot of these different processes and how certain people have been very much heroes, such as President Teddy Roosevelt and one of our own senators, Frank Church, and a lot of local personalities. And we'll get back into that along with a case study. For you who are off at a distance from us, there's a wonderful beach at North Idaho College, and it's a rather long beach that was acquired in the 1970s and then later was dedicated to the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And we'll be talking about that too and showing you some video of the rededication of that in the summer of 2007. Scott, welcome to the program. It's great to have you back.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And it's so good to have our panel here. First of all, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who is Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and Janelle will start today's questioning.
Welcome back to the program, Scott. It's always a privilege to speak with you about these important subjects, and you are a real champion. You are a real expert in this area of land use. Can you tell us why it's important to preserve public lands or lands for the public?
I guess I could come up with 2 words: gated communities. We have been undergoing what is not very popular by a lot of people here, but it's a matter of people finding that, you know, you live in a nice place, I'd like to be there too, and I'm going to come and I'm going to bring all my money and build my big house, and I'm going to seal off the area, and what you used to be able to use, you can't use anymore, and it's rather common. In my business, I get contacted from time to time by people along the lake shores and my neighbors trying to do something that never could be done before, and it typically is the newest arrival who's now decided that, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. 50 years ago, gated communities were called cattle ranches. and you often were not invited to go there with a shotgun. I remember not being invited several times, but at least it was wide open. And now, no, the place gets all locked up. And so it's very important to do what we can to preserve public. And the truth of the matter is that the only really sure way to have public access is to have public ownership. Coeur d'Alene Lake I think, has less public access than most other lakes around. We have the city beach up here. We have the portion that Mr. Hagedorn has let the public use in terms of the floating green and the arrangement there for 20 years or something like that. The federal government has a bit of land down near Powderhorn Bay that's a little park. Beyond that, we have the little places that were once stops for the mail boats. And the state ended up owning those, and then several years ago, the state land board decided that every piece of land that we have, we got to be making money on. And so they came to the state and said, you've been getting this for nothing, and now we figure the market value of this is such and such, and I think you're now going to owe us about $5,000 a year for this piece of property down there. Well, the state didn't have anything. The wonderful thing that happened was, through the intervention of Andrus and others, the Bureau of Land Management agreed to acquire that property and trade with the state and give the state forest land, so the Bureau of Land Management now owns all those things, and there's no charge. But that's about the limit of the public access that is on this lake. And then, of course, we have Tubbs Hill, which again was one of those things, if that hadn't been put in public ownership, it would be a gated community, I think.
Thank you.
Scott, you just touched on it a little bit, but explain further the different examples of public access or different ways that land can be kept for public use. And sometimes it's managed by a city, sometimes it's managed by a county, by the federal, by the state, and even in private ownership, lands can be still maintained for public access. So give us kind of a sampling of different examples.
Well, the one we have here, the beach around the college, is in college ownership. It's all open to the public. The tribes said it was a gathering place, and if you've been down there in the summer, it is very much of a gathering place, up until the curfew rings at least, and it may continue after that. But in any event, it's a gathering place, and it's under total open to everybody, subject only to the usual laws that apply to drunks and that sort of thing. But I mean, it is open. The city park is controlled by the city, and the city beach is open to the city, as is Tubbs Hill. Under the arrangement with Mr. Hagedorn, I think the state actually is the owner of, or not the owner, the lessee of the property that's down there, the Jewett House and beyond, and that is, I think, controlled by the city under some arrangement with the state. You get to the Forest Service launching, they have that. And then we have launching pads around, and these are operated by, in this city, by the city recreation department, and those are public properties. The parking that's adjacent was public properties. And then you have other designated areas, such as wilderness areas, which are almost all of them are Forest Service. There are very few that are Bureau of Land Management and so forth, and those are open areas that are restrictions. If you go in there with a motorbike, you're going to get in trouble, or you should get in trouble. There are snowmobiles or that sort of thing, so the restrictions are placed. And then the control varies with what the entity is and what's it. And you're probably all aware of the major controversy that's been going on for about 10 years over can you use snowmobiles in Yellowstone Park and how many of them can you use and so forth and so on. And so it's subject to a whole variety of circumstances and uses. And then, of course, you can have a private ownership in which the private owner said, you're all welcome to come down here. And way back in the Sanders Beach situation, the first case that I got involved in down there, Dr. Fox owned property down there. Dr. Fox was a total, complete gentleman. Anybody could use the beach. You're welcome to use it. This is all, and so were the rest of the people down there. I mean, this was no question about the ownership. It belonged to the owners, but the public was welcome. And I think the owners down there will tell you that the public wore out its welcome. They've got an argument in that direction. I don't want to get into that, but I mean that it can be any variety of things.
Excellent. Thank you.
You've identified for our viewers in Canada places, of course, they're always welcome to come to Coeur d'Alene and enjoy our incredible beauty. And Lake Coeur d'Alene is one of the more beautiful lakes. It's a natural lake, and I believe it's about 23 miles long, and it has beautiful borders and beaches. So if you talk about, for those who don't know, Tubbs Hill is a natural park that you and Mary Lou Reed, your wife, who was a state senator for a long time, were very instrumental in saving it. And I know that you even put up your property as kind of a collateral, and they had some lawns. And so we have Tubbs Hill, and we have the city beach, and we have the college, you have Canaan Beach, and then a U.S. Supreme Court decision, 5-4 decision a few years ago. The Coeur d'Alene tribe owns the 1/3 of the lower part of the lake, and they're very generous with, as Native Americans have always been, to not only appreciate nature, but make it available to other people. So my question is, Scott, this particular lake, and last week we talked about Upper Priest Lake, and I think one of the more beautiful places I've ever been has been Priest Lake, and it's just an incredible place. So when people come here, they have all this to enjoy. Would you say that Lake Coeur d'Alene has more access than a lot of lakes in our country because of these efforts by a lot of people?
In almost all instances, the access that has been obtained on Coeur d'Alene Lake has been achieved. Didn't come naturally.
Yeah.
And the Maori, for example, is one of them. But it was an effort to buy the property, to put it in public ownership, and so forth and so on. No, I would think that it's hard to make comparisons, Tony,
Yeah.
because lakes vary a whole lot. There are some lakes in which the whole thing is public area, and there are some small lakes in which none of it is. There isn't any public access at all. So it varies a whole lot with where you are.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah, Pend Oreille perhaps has more, because a lot of it on the Green Monarchs on the east side are public ownership, and then there's Farragut, which has all of that, and then the city of Sandpoint has a very large beach up there, and so there's a substantial amount of public access. And there are two factors involved in public access. One is, can I go down to the beach and swim and be out there and play around and bring my kids and do the rest of it? And the other is, can I put a boat in? Well, although many people would disagree with me, I think boat access is something that we've got far too much of. Not boat access. We've got far too many boats that are coming on the lakes, and that is a detrimental situation. And where there used to be a 12-foot boat with a little kicker on the back of it, they're now a 40-foot boat that can go from one end of the lake in 35 minutes.
When your spouse was in the state Senate, Mary Lou Reed, she was a champion of these causes, among other things, and she got some legislation passed, the Lake Protection Act, and I remember at the time she was commenting on those things and saying, we're going to love our lakes to death, and so there can be a real detrimental effect if they're overused and with that kind of machinery. I do want to do one other thing, because I promised our viewers I'd do that before I go back to the panel. Last week we talked a lot more about the case study of how what's now called the Yup Canaan Beach at North Idaho College was preserved, which is a really long stretch of beach, and it's open to everyone. And it was a long struggle starting in 1972, and it was realized in 1976, and then it was dedicated with Governor Cecil Anders here with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe, I believe it was 1986. And then last summer, because of your great idea, the summer of 2007, we reconvened and rededicated it and reminded people that it's going to be in public access forever because of the way that it came about. And we had the Coeur d'Alene Tribe here, and it was a great day. And Scott, I think in the clip we're going to show, you were speaking to this issue too. So before we move on, I just want our viewers from other places to see how special that lake is, that beach is, and that dedication. So we'll run that video right now.
All of this lake, this river, and the beach was here as we see it today, eons before men and women first came to this place. Between 15,000 and 12,800 years ago, at the end of the Ice Age, there were 40 tremendous cataclysmic events, which were called the Lake Missoula floods. They created Coeur d'Alene Lake, and they created the Spokane River, all that you see before you. The Native American men and women who first came to live here did not claim to own what nature possessed. and what nature had provided. Ownership, the legal right to possess and to exclude, came with the British and was written into our Constitution and then into our statutes and laws. In the first 150 years of our country, all the federal lands were surveyed and divided, and all was intended with the objective of selling off as much as possible. Then, beginning with Yellowstone Park and continuing with the bully efforts of Teddy Roosevelt, there's been a counter drive to keep the public ownership of special places of beauty and of special environmental value. This beach is such a place. As so often happens in Coeur d'Alene, saving this last best place for the public was not the result of careful planning or long-range foresight. It was aroused citizens resisting a bad proposal and creating a counter momentum to protect, all combined with a lot of luck and fortuitous timing that led to the acquisition.
I just think that clip, Scott, was a wonderful clip to take for our viewers who couldn't be here in our town. It really, and your eloquent comments illustrate how important this is, this one case study, but there are many others around our country and great victories for the public to appreciate. I just wanted them to see a clip of this case study, but it's only one of many, and you were very eloquent.